welcome to the September edition of HR Hot Topics. I'm your host, Jody Schaefer, and as always, we aim to make this the most informative 5-ish minutes of your month. Well, folks, the last 2 months, I've been able to talk about topics that were not COVID related. It was like a personal victory in my HR world. But for September, we're back at it, right? The Delta variant is something that can't be ignored, incredibly contagious, sweeping across the nation. Michigan is not immune to that, and certainly neither is your workplace. And now that school's back in session, it's probably going to hit us on a couple of fronts. So I wanted to talk about some new guidance that have come out for the federal OSHA agency. This came out on August 13th. The feds have published some new guidance. This is guidance, not requirements, but the guidance is titled Mitigating and Preventing the Spread of COVID-19 in the Workplace. So I thought, that's important for all of us to know. So it talks about several things, and I want to talk first about those of your staff that are vaccinated and some of the guidance around that. So the first strategy is to encourage vaccination whenever possible. Some employers have gone so far as to mandate vaccination. That's actually happening more and more, especially since the FDA has now given final approval to the Pfizer vaccine. So Pfizer is no longer operating under emergency use authorization. It's been granted full FDA approval. And from what I'm hearing in the news, Moderna is probably about 30 days behind Pfizer in that. And that just has to do with when the paperwork was submitted. I'm not sure if Johnson & Johnson is going to go for full approval or not. So the latest I heard on that is they're kind of waiting to see whether or not demand is enough to go through the process because it's expensive. So anyway, we've got Pfizer that's fully approved, and we're seeing employers in various industries starting to mandate vaccines. And so far, those mandates are being upheld by the courts. Some of these have gone to the Supreme Court level, and the Supreme Court has gotten involved in the early 1900s with smallpox vaccinations and granting that was legal to mandate. Again, requiring vaccinations for kids to attend public schools. So the Supreme Court has touched on this a couple different times in our fairly recent history, and the federal courts at this point are continuing to uphold these employer mandates. So I'm seeing more and more clients start to move in this direction. And that's one of the strategies that the OSHA guidance is pushing. Again, recommendations, not requirements. But another one, and again, this has to do with vaccine and your vaccinated staff, is that unfortunately, this Delta variant is highly contagious. And even if you are fully vaccinated, you can still contract COVID-19 and specifically the Delta variant. But the vaccine is highly effective against preventing serious illness, hospitalization, and death. So while you can contract it and potentially spread it and pass it to someone else, the vaccine is still going to do its job to keep you safe in almost all cases. But because of the ability to contract and spread, this new OSHA guidance says, if you are in a public place, in a community that has elevated or substantial risk of spread, you should probably be wearing a mask. And so in your workplaces, that might be something you consider, bringing back some masking policies. Again, this is not a mandate yet, this is just simply guidance, but you might consider it for both vaccinated and unvaccinated staff. Another one falls in line with some things that we were doing earlier in the pandemic. These used to be requirements under our state OSHA guidance, creating social distancing whenever possible, offering remote work whenever possible. Again, the masking guidance I just talked about, making sure we have good personal hygiene and that we're disinfecting workspaces. So all of that is reiterated in this new federal OSHA guidance, and something that maybe you never stopped doing if you had those COVID-19 preparedness and response plans that all employers used to be required to have. Just because the requirement went away doesn't mean that those best practices should have been scrapped. And so maybe you've been following along with that up until now, and you can continue to do so. And actually, the CDC and federal OSHA is encouraging you to do so. One other note on your fully vaccinated staff: if there is an exposure, folks that are fully vaccinated still don't have to quarantine. That's CDC guidance, and OSHA is mirroring what the CDC has currently said. And so you don't have to quarantine, but what the CDC is saying is that you should get tested 3 to 5 days after exposure to make sure that you didn't contract COVID yourself and then inadvertently pass it on to somebody else. So the testing piece is new, and we should be doing that even if we're fully vaccinated if we've been exposed. And then the CDC is also recommending that even if you're fully vaccinated, if you think you've been exposed, you should be wearing a mask for the next 14 days until you know for sure whether or not you've contracted it. So that's the fully vaccinated side. Obviously, if you're unvaccinated, your risks are much higher. Mask wearing is heavily encouraged. Maybe as an employer, you're requiring that. You can do that. I've seen some employers also require testing for their non-vaccinated staff. They haven't gone so far as to mandate the vaccine, but they've put some mitigation strategies in place to help minimize risk in the workplace, especially with those unvaccinated folks. And so the masking and the testing are two strategies that I've seen quite a bit recently, and you're fully within your rights to do that. One other note I want to make here, the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, this was part of that American Recovery Plan, one of the stimulus bills that was passed initially under the Trump administration, and then there was another iteration that came out under the Biden administration. It's that plan that allowed for people that are out for COVID-related reasons to still get paid wages, and then employers could recoup those dollars, dollar for dollar, in terms of an offset to your federal payroll tax liability. So in essence, the federal government was going to pick up the tab on that. It was a requirement up through 2020. It then became optional. So if you have been offering that to your staff and following along with those rules, you can continue to do so up until the end of this month. So that tax credit expires the end of September. So something to just keep an eye on, right, if you're using that program. One other thing that expired this month, and it will have expired by the time you're viewing this, is that federal subsidy to the unemployment insurance. The additional $300 that the state of Michigan was offering to the state benefit, right, the $300 that was coming through the feds, that goes away, or that went away on September 4th. So it remains to be seen if that will push more people to the workforce or not. I know many of you are struggling with hiring, and we're hoping for an influx of talent to the labor pool. I don't know yet whether or not having that federal subsidy go away will be incentive enough to push people to the workplace or not, or push them to the jobs that you're looking to hire for or not. But at least know that the federal piece is no longer there as of the 4th. So, as I said, this federal OSHA guidance is something that you should all be taking a look at. It does align with CDC recommendations. At this point in time, and this is being filmed on September 1st, the state OSHA agency has not come out with any new requirements. And so right now, the state agency is just pointing all employers to CDC guidance and strongly encouraging that we follow that. But if anything changes on that front between now and when we push this out to all of you in a couple of weeks, we'll make sure to note that in the email message below. So as always, if you have questions, you can reach me directly, Jody Schaefer at workwithhrm.com. Until then, stay safe, stay diligent. I'll see you next month.